Ken. I have been in Billings, Montana for 24 hours as of right now, and I have had just a wonderful experience. This community is pretty amazing. There's so many comps to Rochester. You know, Rochester's 110,000, you guys are 100,000. You've got great diversity in terms of your business structures. We have a pretty much of a one-horse town, if you will. But I just have seen, I've done a walking tour, I've done driving tours since I've been here, and it's just been really joy. So thank you for being here and thank you for spending your time with me. I'm going to start by showing you a quick video, and the reason I'm going to show this to you, and it's very short, I'm not a shiny marketing person, but this at least lets you see Rochester, because it's really hard sometimes to actually be in a group like this and talk about our journey through the city when you really haven't seen the city. So if you don't mind, I'm going to just do this video, and then I have another short video as well. So that was just a glimpse of the city, so you could kind of get a sense of scope and what our city looks like a little bit. The journey I'm going to talk with you about today is DMC, Destination Medical Center Journey. You're all experiencing a part of the journey that I've already been through. Talk about blood, sweat, and tears, and there's battle scars and bruises to prove it. And it's a gritty business. It's not easy to move something this big and this forward-thinking into the future, and I applaud you for considering this and for trying to get ahead of the game. For us, we actually needed to get ahead of the game, and I think for many communities, I feel probably very similar. That, and I think you saw Dr. Gianrico Ferrugia, he's the new CEO of Mayo Clinic, and his comment was, if cities aren't in this kind of game, they're not going to be viable cities. And so he was very thankful that we were moving forward on this Destination Medical Center. This is our mission, and all of you have been involved in mission statements and vision statements in your careers and your places, and every single word mattered to us. So to tell you a little bit about our journey in the DMC initiative, I first want to start by talking about what our goals are. This is a large economic development initiative. Our goals to create a plan, which we've done, and we are in implementation phase, which is great. We want to leverage the public investment of the $585 million that we secured from the state of Minnesota in one legislative session. We're going to create approximately 30,000 jobs Remember, this is over 20 years. So this initiative is 20 years. It's not 1, it's not 4, like some people think for some reason they think it's 4. It's 20. So that's a long, long initiative that we have time to plan and adjust and amend and move forward. We will generate approximately $8 billion in new tax revenue, and of course the one at the bottom is really where we started our journey. We wanted to make sure we had the best experience in Rochester for patients, for visitors, and for those of us who live and work there. So this is our journey. We started in about 2009, so it's not for the faint of heart, I would say, and it's not for impatient people like me. I've grown patience in this process, and I was at the very beginning of all of this. And it started at a board meeting with Mayo Clinic, where we said we're going to maintain our healthcare, our world status in the healthcare arena. And to do that, Mayo Clinic had to do many things differently, like your healthcare organizations here had to do. The healthcare environment was tippy. It landed on Rochester, just like it landed on Billings. And healthcare leaders around the world had to say, we're going to do things differently. The payer mix is different. The reimbursement rates are different. Things are changing in front of our eyes, and to do that, Mayo is committed to keeping the patient front and center and to make change in terms of how they're delivering care. So they were working on that part, and at the same time, in the same meeting, Dr. Eamon said, you know, this is all good, but we better figure out the community part of this. So Mayo has worked with the community for 150 years, great partners, arm in arm, but not as deliberate as we've learned through research that perhaps we should have been. We've learned through a lot of research throughout the country and the nation that communities matter. I mean, it matters just as much, your community and the strength of your community and the innovation and the forward thinking of a community matters just as much as somebody looking for a job at Mayo Clinic. They're weighing things so differently now. So we embarked on an experience, this journey, by first starting with research. So true to Mayo's nature, we are all about research. Can't wait to see more numbers and research. And you can't, in my world, I couldn't go to Mayo and say, I think we should get in the game here on this economic development deal, because we were in a position of strength, we need to move forward. It had to be steeped in numbers and research. And I'm so thankful for that today, because it's helped me through all of these years as we've been working on Mayo Clinic, on DMC. So we went through some research I'll talk about in a minute. We did some city sales tax work. We went through legislation in 2013. We came out of legislation with a nod for $585 million of public support for infrastructure that will support private investment to the tune of $5 to $6 billion in Rochester over the next 20 years. Now, what I am very aware of, particularly for this audience, is we have Mayo. Like, I get that. But this is an initiative and an economic development model that can easily be scaled. And that's why I'm really happy to share this with this community, because you guys are on it. I mean, you're watching it, you're looking at it, you're looking ahead, you're looking forward, and an economic development model like this is not that much risk for your state. We then built our development plan. You built yours first. We built ours after legislative session. And then we are now happily into implementation mode, which I can't tell you how happy I am to be in that place. So quickly, we first went from a position of strength. Like I said, Rochester wasn't failing. Rochester wasn't dismal. Rochester wasn't tanking. We weren't climbing our way up the ladder to try to find success. We were in a very fine place. Our community is nice. It was nice. It was just fine. It was average fine. But what we needed is to take that next place into the future. We have 115,000 population. We're a highly educated community. We've got these beautiful nature trails. You saw some of that in the video. We have a higher median income than in communities of our size, but when you'll see in my research, we spend less in our own community. So I spend $5,000 less a year in my own community. Why? Because it wasn't meeting my needs. And that's what our research told us. Visitors to Rochester, to just give you a glimpse of what we're talking about and why we're doing a DMC. We have 3 million visitors to Rochester. Most of them come for this one reason, healthcare. 67% come from healthcare. So when I said we are a one-horse town, it's kind of a big horse in the middle of Rochester. And then you'll see in this convention and sports part, which is the next largest, which is 20%, a lot of the convention and sports business is related to healthcare. So we've also been talking about models in terms of what can we drive to Convention and Visitors Bureau that's related to healthcare that can be new generation in terms of revenue and a new model. We have approximately 3,000 patients and companions that are in Rochester Mayo Clinic every single day, and the community wraps its arms around those patients every day, and they are the powerhouse behind the success of Mayo. Every community member, it seems to be in our DNA, they help patients every single day. They walk them to appointments, they take time out of their busy day to help them find the subway and the skyway and food, and I learned a lot in this research just on that particular value of the community, and I'll talk about that in a second. So why DMC? Rochester was moving along just fine. Mayo was fine. They weren't tanking either. Healthcare environment landed on us, and we learned that we need to do things different so we can maintain that status and be a viable community. So we looked across the nation and we said, who are our competitors and what's going on? And that really told a story in the community, and it told a story in the state as well. But our community, sometimes when you're in a community with a successful organization like that, you just think the world is fine and it's going to be fine forever. And we looked out there and we said, not true. These healthcare organizations are doing things we weren't doing. They were paying attention to their community and how their community was interacting with their healthcare organizations differently than we were. In my mind, they were ahead of the game. And so we learned from all of them, and we learned that we don't want to be behind the game, we want to be ahead of the game, both in healthcare and in the community relations. We also did this crazy 2-year journey on research. So we hired a firm we hired the Northwestern University actually. They had this great program that did research on urban planning, and it was a really interesting model. They sent students to work with us for 6 months, and these students actually walked with our patients, ate with our patients, talked with our patients and visitors to find out how many steps do you walk before you turn around and go back to your hotel. What kind of food is missing? Where are the gaps? What do you like to do? What don't you like to do? What are you finding here? What are you not finding here? And so we learned in one slide, here's 1.5 years of research. The experience gap on the left. We learned that every time a patient or visitor touched Mayo, whether it be via the phone before they even got there, or their first interaction with Mayo once they got to Rochester, or they meet their doc, they get their diagnosis, good or bad, they have a provider that helps them through the journey. Every time they touched Mayo, they had a really great sense of confidence. They gained confidence as they went through their journey at Mayo, meaning, I'm in the right place. I get it now. I get why I'm at Mayo Clinic. And you know, Mayo is only 110,000 in the middle of a cornfield, I kid you not. It's hard to get to sometimes, and so it is a destination in and of itself. But we learned that experience was fabulous. They just thought it was great. Then when our people, patients and visitors, stepped off the curb of Mayo into the community, the story was very different. Our community didn't realize the story was different. Mayo Clinic didn't realize the story was different until we did this research. People couldn't find what they were looking for. They didn't have confidence that they would actually find it if they kept walking. We learned a couple of things. We learned that our patients would start walking somewhere and they'd go back to the hotel, but we learned that they don't want to be in the hotel. At Mayo, we were a little bit centered on ourselves, I would say, and we thought that patients were with us all day long. Like they come to Mayo and they get poked and prodded all day and they're with us and they go back to their hotel room and they're happy there. And what we learned is quite the opposite. Our patients and companions told us, no, we want to get out of the hotel and we want to go somewhere that's vibrant, high energy, it feels lively, to give me life, to give me just for a little moment so let me feel normal. That's what we learned. We also learned that the people that are providing hope to our patients, and I of course thought it was Mayo because I'm a Mayo employee, so I was like, of course Mayo is the hope provider. And we learned that it's the hospitality industry that's providing hope for our patients. They're the ones that sit with our patients, cry with our patients, walk our patients to an appointment, help them through a really tough decision, gather their family. They have birthday parties for people. They had a wedding. The hospitality came to our hospital and had weddings for people that are ill, that can't get out of their bedroom or out of the room. So it was the hospitality industry that taught us a big lesson. And the lesson was, work with the community. If you want to go big and do this big thing, then work with the community. And we did. We did it big. And so we, did task forces and work groups and everything else you can imagine so that we can start to fill this gap. This is how DMC started. So that's the experience gap. The quality gap was really concerning, and you all, I know, are after workforce. Who's not? Everybody's all about workforce, as Steve said. We're all looking for the same people to come to our communities. Well, what we learned is that 48% of the patients that were surveyed said that once they step off the curb of Mayo, 45% of them had a high level of satisfaction which was going on in the community. Like, what did they find what they were looking for in the community, and were they satisfied? So less than half of our patients. And I actually think the number's probably higher, meaning there's probably more people that aren't satisfied with our community in a sense, basically, but they're there, hoping for everything out of the healthcare organization. The other number, the 29% number, was more concerning. So those of us who live and work in Rochester, only 29% of us are highly satisfied with what's happening in the community. The reason that was so disturbing, as you can imagine, is we got to hire the best and the brightest from all over the world. And then we have people saying our community isn't so great, or it wasn't meeting the needs of what they were looking for. Again, a big reason for us to go forward and do this DMC initiative. So we did. We marched off into, I don't know what to do now. You better help me. I'm scared at all. So all of our research landed in these 4 areas of focus, and we learned through all the research that not one of these is the big deal and the big silver bullet. So I was coming out of this thinking, well, we'll figure out 3 or 4 things and we'll fix them and we'll call it a day. And actually we learned quite the opposite. We learned that every one of these things matters. It's not about one product. It's not about one hotel. It's not about sports and rec. It's not about commercial real estate. It's about all of them. So city council members, it's like building your city. All these components matter, as you know, and you think about it every day in your jobs. We had to make sure that our plan incorporated all of this to build a city of the future, to transform our community, frankly, from those results that we got to the next phase of what a viable community is that can support the growth of Mayo Clinic. It was very helpful as we did our planning to have those areas of focus. We found ourselves at the board meeting at Mayo Clinic so we did the visioning with the community. We went through all this research and learned where the gaps were, which were incredible, eye-opening for all of us, because we think we're great, and we were a little less than that probably. Then we went to a board meeting at Mayo and we said, we have 2 choices. We learned all this stuff. Here's where we're at. We can either take the blue line and let the market do what the market's doing. We didn't have a lot of development going on, but we had a fine community. So we could let the market keep rolling and doing what it's doing, or we had a choice. We should go big and go bold and transform Rochester. And I think the board picked the right thing. So when you see some of our results, I think you'll agree. It was frightening, it was a big lift, it was future visionary, and we had to bring a lot of people with us. A lot of people, and you all know how that is. So, when I think about the engagement that we did, when we figured out we had to build a plan and we had to figure out how to get to the legislation, we worked with the city to understand where our gap was in terms of infrastructure. So we learned that we The infrastructure alone in Rochester could not support the growth of $3 billion over the next 20 years. It just couldn't do it. The tax base alone just couldn't do it. So we needed to go to the state of Minnesota to say, we need some help if we want to keep this asset of Minnesota in Minnesota, if we want to keep it growing in Minnesota. That's kind of the turning point for us where we became a state initiative. It wasn't about Rochester. We were pretty lucky to be in Rochester to do all this great work, but it was about the state of Minnesota and convincing the state of Minnesota that you want Rochester to continue to grow. You want Mayo to grow here rather than their sites in Florida and Arizona. They will grow all their sites, but where do we want the most growth? In Rochester. So we embarked on what we call Destination Medical Center. The term started Destination Medical Community, and when we realized we're gonna need the state help and we need the state lift, bipartisan support, we started really thinking about it as a state initiative. We did so many presentations locally, regionally, and statewide than any organization should ever do, I think. Small group, but mighty, and we just marched through this community and would present to anyone, everything. We got ambassador groups behind us. We had planning groups with us to really help tell the story about why DMC. Why do we need to do this? Building from a position of strength is sometimes kind of harder to get people to understand because you're not in dire straits. You know, if you're tanking, everybody's like, charge, let's do it. It's really, you know, when you're in good shape, like Billings is, sometimes it's harder to move the needle and get people to understand why we need to look forward and leapfrog into the future. So we did a lot of community support and state support, and we built this economic development model. It was hard to explain the model. So the model that we built, that we took to the legislation, was private in first, public follows. And we said that we would build $200 million of investment first in Rochester before a nickel drops from the state of Minnesota. Our legislative body didn't quite know what to do with that. Because they kind of looked at us like we had four heads at first, because I think they're used to saying, we're going to build something, give us a bunch of money, and then people are really going to come, we promise. And we said, we're going to prove it first. We're going to show you, we're going to develop, and then your money starts to flow. So there is low risk. So we built a formula. So much private goes in, so much public follows. But again, easy for me to tell you that, but it's hard for people to understand it. So we did this. I just wanted to show this as a tool of what we did to share the model, that you guys might want to do something like it.
For over 150 years, Minnesota, home of Mayo Clinic, has been a global destination for health and healing for millions of patients. Today's healthcare environment presents many challenges. Mayo Clinic's competitors in the U.S. and throughout the world are working to become global destination medical centers, or DMCs. These centers offer high-quality medical care and have services that attract patients and visitors from throughout the world. Mayo Clinic is working with the state of Minnesota to make sure it maintains its status as one of the world's top DMCs. It plans to invest more than $3.5 billion in private capital over the next 20 years if the DMC is located in Minnesota. Mayo Clinic and its community partners have submitted a proposal to the 2013 Minnesota legislature to finance the public investment needed to fuel the private investments necessary to create the DMC. The proposal includes a public body created in state statute to make the decisions about how to plan, implement, and finance the public investments in the DMC expansion. These dollars will not go to Mayo Clinic buildings or programs, but for public infrastructure to support growth. Here's how a project under DMC might work. Mayo Clinic is building a $188 million proton beam facility to treat cancer patients. The facility is generating 500 construction jobs, as well as 250 staff positions when it's operational. Mayo patients often come with family members who stay in the community for days, weeks, or months. The proton beam facility will lead to thousands of new visitors to Rochester each year, who will utilize roadways and public transportation, stay in hotels, eat in restaurants, and become part of our extended community. Funding from DMC could be used to acquire land or to prepare a site for developing housing, education, or recreation services for these families. Over time, as Mayo Clinic expands and visitation increases, DMC will continue to support the costs that result from increased demand on infrastructure and services in the community, including roadway improvements, parking, and transportation. That's great for Rochester, but what's the benefit for Minnesota? DMC is the largest economic development opportunity in the state and is one of the largest in the country. Mayo growth combined with DMC will create an estimated 25,000 to 35,000 jobs in Minnesota. DMC will generate significant new taxes over a 20-year period for the state, the city of Rochester, Olmsted County, and other jurisdictions, such as the Rochester School District. DMC is also expected to create new biotech businesses and jobs developed through close collaborations with Mayo Clinic. Finally, DMC elevates Minnesota as a global center for healthcare. DMC is good for Minnesota. It's good for Mayo Clinic and the patients it serves. It's good for visitors to our state. It's good for all of us. To learn more, visit us on
website. So I'm gonna close because I can't figure my way out of this. So a couple of things I would want you to know. So we did this, we went through the session, then we built our plan, our DMC development plan, in 2015. Once that plan was built, we were in implementation mode. That's when we brought in developers, investors, interested parties from all over the country, frankly, and certainly from over the state of Minnesota. We recognized and applauded local developers, and I think that's really important because they've been with us for a long time. I would say the local developers are probably more successful today than they were before DMC. We have about 28 projects in the pipeline, which I can't show you, but it gives you a good sense of, oh, maybe I can. No. There's 28 projects in the pipeline right now. 9 of them will open just this year. When we first came out of the chute in 2013, we spent a lot of time on the front end, actually, we spent a lot of time on the front end building the infrastructure, meaning our business infrastructure, and I'm so glad we did because now we can go faster. We are moving a lot faster now in terms of building the infrastructure. So initially, right out of the chute, everybody thought all the buildings were going to pop up out of the ground. I swear to God, they thought things would just come up out of the ground. And so we got people saying, what are you doing? Like it's a year later, we haven't seen one project come out of the ground, what's going on? Now, 4 years later, I hear there's just too much going on. There's just too much. It's too crazy. There's orange cones all over the place and there's cranes in the air and there's just too much to absorb. So that means, in my mind, we are doing something right as a whole. We have 3 priorities. Discovery Square, which is a bioscience, life science campus that we're building in downtown Rochester, which we did extra research on to figure out if this thing can work, and it can. We are opening our first building. We just opened our first building in May, and it's already full, so we're on building number 2. This is a quick map to show you the new projects. DMC $585 million flows into a hard wire or a hard boundary. Basically, it's in downtown Rochester. It's not all of the city of Rochester. It's downtown because we need to create density, urban, live, work, play environment, and we don't have that today. So we're adding all of that. These are the projects. It gives you a sense of the projects. The orange ones, or whatever color that is, are DMC funded, and the gray ones are other in private investment that didn't even ask for DMC funding. That's the model. The model works that way. Finally, I'll just leave here by showing you a little snapshot of the types of development we're doing. We're doing commercial development, renovating buildings in Rochester. One Discovery Square is this bioscience, life science campus start. That's our first building. We've got a Mayo Civic Center that we just did a renovation on. We've got a new hotel just opened, and we're going to be opening 4 hotels over the next 2 years, new hotels. First Avenue parking, we did a parking ramp. Of course, you can't go anywhere without talking about parking, and we're doing affordable housing on top of that parking ramp now, a year later. And this is an example of one of the housing units, apartments that's right next to our hospital campus. So this is progress. We are on plan. We are moving forward quite rapidly. We're managing change as best we can. We've included the community in all of this, and our investment is going in the right direction. We're at about $700 million of investment in the ground right now, and on a path for continued success.